Let's talk a bunch of different topics.
How'd her career get there?
This is a podcast with Lauren Asghari.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening. Hit that like button, leave a positive comment, or hit subscribe to get alerted when new episodes drop. All of this will help keep the project going. Thank you for your support and enjoy the episode. This is the Lauren Asghari podcast, How'd Her Career Get There? And my guest today is Jaime Windon, who is the founder, owner, president, chief rum lover of Lion Rum, which is also under the Windon Distilling Company. So welcome, Jaime.
Thank you.
So I am very excited for this conversation. I am fascinated to learn about the industry that you're in a little more, and then obviously your story to get there. So let's start by giving just kind of an overview, maybe 30 seconds or so, just about like what your business is.
Okay. So we are a very small craft rum distillery. We make rum from scratch. We have been doing that for the last 12 years. We consider ourselves an American rum distillery, which means we use American sugarcane that we bring in from Louisiana. We do all of the fermentation, distillation, proofing, infusing, aging, bottling, labeling. Everything happens in our building. So that's something we refer to as cane to glass. This industry has grown a ton in the last decade, and there's many ways to be a distiller. There's many ways to bring a product to market and see that through. And so our way is a very specific way of doing everything, every step of the way, and only producing rum. So that's something we're really proud of.
Perfect. Well, I am thrilled to get to how things are going there. I know that you just celebrated your 12th year, or in your 12th year in business, or just celebrated your 12th year. We'll get to that shortly. But before we go there, let's talk a little bit about Jaime. Tell just kind of your background story, where you're from, any siblings, what were you like as a kid?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I grew up, I'm in Maryland now, on the Eastern Shore in St. Michael's. I grew up on the other side of the bridge, which I always considered just Maryland. But now after 12 years here, I call it the Western Shore, which is wild. Grew up outside of DC in a town called Laurel, Maryland, which is not the smallest town, but I think growing up, I felt like I was in a very small town because I went to a small Catholic school, very tiny community. I went to kindergarten with the same kids that I graduated high school with. And so I loved small communities. I have a real respect for social accountability. I think I learned that from a young age. Very tight family, very small, one younger sister who has always been my best friend and to this day is my right-hand woman running our company. And always been, I guess, anyone that knows me would call me an overachiever and a perfectionist. And I like hard work. I've been working since I was legally allowed to do so, whether it was at a flower farm or an ice cream shop. I enjoy that. I enjoy people.
When you were a kid, were you the type of perfectionist that was like, okay, I have to do really good in school, or were you out there kind of hustling to make money, or a combination of the two?
Both. I always loved school. If I didn't get 100%, then I failed. There was no middle ground. So I was very much the straight A student. And then I was never really competitive in like the sports arena. But anything I did, I wanted to be the best. I wanted to win. I was just cleaning out boxes the other day and found my like bowling championship for like high marks. So I reveled in that. And I think that in the 80s, we celebrated it a little less. So it was a big deal when you got a certificate or you got anything. And so I was always going for that. And then working was just another way. That was the first way to see, I'm really getting rewarded. I get a bank account. And so earning my own way, I was very proud to do that from a young age.
And what did you, when you were young, do you remember thinking like, as I get older, or when I grow up, I want to do X or I want to be X? Did you ever think about things that way?
Yeah, I always wanted to be a lawyer. And I don't actually know why, other than my father ran a car dealership. He was the body shop manager and he had a lot of friends and he knew everyone. And I guess he had a friend that was a lawyer. And I must have liked the stories he told, courtroom kind of law. And I think I enjoyed the idea of the performative aspect because I've always loved to perform and I've always loved people to listen to me and, look at me, look what I'm doing. And so I thought that seemed like a celebrated role. And I also knew that, I feel like in the 80s, you're supposed to want to be a doctor or a lawyer or an astronaut. It was like we aspired to these very stereotypical professions. And I kind of carried that with me for a long time. I even went pre-law in my undergraduate program and then realized that the idea I had of what I wanted out of this law career was very different than the many, many hours in the law library. Although I am studious and love reading, it just didn't seem as fun and dynamic. And so I gave that up just for immediate action with people. And so, yeah, that went by the wayside. And I don't regret it. I don't think Actually, I don't know. I do a lot of lobbying now, so I am in the legal sphere. But I'm happy with the way things turned out.
Where did you go to college? Did you go in Maryland?
Yeah, I went to a very small school that still exists, although under a different moniker. I went to Villa Julie College, which is now Stevenson University.
Mm-hmm. And then, so you studied pre-law there?
Yeah, so I was really attracted because for such a tiny school, I think it was like 1,200 students at the time, you could start on your major in your freshman year. And I thought that was really fascinating. So I took a bunch of law classes. I think half my schedule for a year and a half was law classes. But I immediately, once I realized that wasn't as fun as I wanted it to be, I started taking all these journalism classes and I started writing for the paper. So I graduated with a true liberal arts degree. I think it was interdisciplinary studies, which was right up my alley, whatever you want it to be. So it was philosophy and religion and writing and just all of those classes that made my degree.
And then you graduate, and then where do you go from after college? Do you enter the workforce?
No. Yes and no. So I had been working all through high school. So I started working in hospitality when I was in high school, working at a golf course, working at restaurants. And so in college, I was working almost full time, kind of by choice. I enjoyed it and I had fun. And in the hospitality industry, you can make a good amount of money a few nights a week. So when I graduated, all my friends, went and just got the proper job in their field, it felt like. And I moved to California for 9 months. And then I moved to London for a few months. And then I moved to Florida. And then that was really the beginning of me just traveling, writing, bartending, and about a decade of just seeing the world.
That sounds amazing. As you were doing that, were your parents supportive of that? Were they like, "Whoa, Jamie, pick something and do it"? What was their response to that?
Yeah, they were. I think my parents, when your child is capable of doing it on their own, I think you're proud, right? It wasn't like I was calling them saying, "Hey, I'm at a bus stop in Ecuador, send me money." I was able to do this all on my own. I think they were incredibly proud, but we didn't travel like that growing up. I never even took like a semester abroad in college. So to leave Maryland after 21 years and go to California seemed wild. I'm going to the other side of the country. But they were proud. And I worked in restaurants and I also worked in a magazine. So there's always this blend of like my writing abilities and my bartending skills. And then when I started traveling a little further, they were nervous just because, this was before Uber and widely useful internet. So I was, landing in foreign countries and, going to a phone bank and trying to get to where we're going, looking through a lonely planet. And so I look back now and I'm like, wow, they must have had a lot of confidence in me because they never told me no. But I think they were worried for sure. But I thought I was very smart and very safe in how I traveled.
What do you remember as you were traveling? This might be a test of your memory, but as you were traveling to different places, even California, it's a different. I'm also born and raised in Maryland, and I've traveled different parts of the countries and the world. But even California is like, even though it's America, it's still different part, right? even Eastern Shore versus Western, right? Just different minor cultural differences. But as you're traveling the world or within the U.S., what do you remember kind of like learning, or what lessons did you learn that kind of have affected you or that you carry through today?
Oh, I think the biggest thing is when you grow up in a small community and everyone is a lot like you. And I say this in the way of like my classmates throughout growing up. Everybody was very driven, very studious. We all had similar backgrounds, similar energies. I went to a small college where it was also I've surrounded myself with similar people, working in bars and restaurants, real hustle mentality. And so to move from the East Coast to the West Coast was the first time I realized how East Coast I was. I talked really fast. I moved really fast. Everybody wanted me to chill out and calm down. And I was like, oh no, I guess maybe Southern California, although the weather is lovely, this isn't suited towards me. I loved living there, but I didn't stay because I always felt there's been places I've gone where I feel like I'm just on the surface. Mm-hmm. And whether I love it, respect it, I'm intrigued by it, if I don't just fit right in, I don't stay. So I moved around a lot. Obviously then moving to London, totally different. My first time being a complete foreigner. And that was one experience. And then I love the world because I want to experience it all. I mean, I've always felt this strong desire to want to live every type of life there is. Mm-hmm. But I think as much as I learned about the world, you learn so much about who you are becomes crystallized, if it isn't already. And everyone, I think, has these awakening moments at different times in their life. But I never saw myself as that unique or that different because, again, I was surrounded. Even like if you were to say, oh, she was a very good student. Well, everyone that I was in my class was a good student, so you start to see, oh, okay, I do have more energy. I am really, really friendly. I didn't know that was what and so there's a lot of stereotypical ideas of what Americans are like. And I like to think that in those years when I was traveling, I embodied the best of it. I was a fast talking, friendly, excited person. And they were always like, oh, here comes Jamie. She's the American. She's so excited about everything. She's so positive. And gosh, I guess I missed that was the perception of Americans in the 90s, right, and early 2000s, that we were so happy and friendly. But yeah, no. So I think I learned very much what made me unique and how to use that to my advantage, or when that wasn't appropriate, when I needed to be quieter or step back and let things unfold.
What's I know that you said that your parents were very supportive of you. What are one or two traits, either from them or somebody else as your childhood, whatever resonates with you, but one or two traits from your childhood that you've carried through with you today, and who'd you get those traits from?
Oh, both my parents were like the hardest working people I know. They always both had multiple jobs. My mom worked in our schools, which was awesome. So we got to be on her schedule, but she also at some points worked nights. My father, ran a body shop. He was ultimate customer service and hospitality, but he always had 2 or 3 other things going on. So work, a really strong work ethic. Everyone in my family has always worked from a young age. And humor. I definitely get my sense of humor from my dad. He was the silliest guy, always making up songs and rhymes and riddles. And even though that will drive 2 teenage girls batty, we loved it. And so I think just that charm or that connecting. But my dad was always the guy who everyone knew Tommy, he could fix any problem. That was his job, but he also loved doing it. And I think when I stretch myself really thin, or when I put all the responsibility on myself, I say, oh, this must have been what it was like for my dad when he was my age and he was balancing all these things and trying to be everything to everyone. It's not easy, but it is incredibly rewarding when it works.
I'm gonna circle back to that a little bit later, the kind of integration of life and work all in one. But so you graduate college into journalism, moving around the country or even the world, right? Journalism, hospitality. How do you then go from that to starting a distilling company?
Well, in between, so I've always wanted to be a writer, but I somehow never really made that work. I think sometimes the thing that we want to do the most, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. So I did light writing. I did some magazine pieces, some travel work, but then I fell into photography. And photography really was my first love and my main career for about 15 years. And it's something I still dabble in. And that's what really propelled me around the world. And so photography gave me access to so many worlds, so many communities, so many ceremonies. And that's where I really became absolutely obsessed with cultures and learning about everyone and how we celebrate and what we do. But again, this whole time, I was always working in bars and restaurants. So the kind of common theme was always hospitality and loving people, loving learning and being exposed to things. And what happens at celebrations is food and drink, right? So alcohol became very interesting as a cultural element. So many celebrations are tied to alcohol. And as you go around the world, you see what everybody everybody drinks and how they use it. I travel in hot countries a lot. So I love South America, the Caribbean. I spent years living on off the coast of Kenya, on the equator. And so sugarcane spirits kind of became a theme. But again, this was all just kind of stuff I can look back and see now. Starting the distillery was a complete accident. But it made sense. I always say it's like this lateral move where I had all the skills. I just would never have known that it was to put into play here. So I had been living in Kenya. So lots of traveling all about the world, a lot of photography. And then I settled in Kenya in my early 30s. And I lived on an island called Lamu Island for 2 years. And I was done. That was it. This is where
what encouraged that, right? I settled in Kenya.
So I visited Kenya. I was doing a lot of photography work and I was trying to challenge. I was the happy photographer. I did a lot of weddings. I did a lot of documentary work surrounding joy. One of my favorite clients was Children's National Medical Center, and I would get to spend days with doctors and nurses and childcare specialists and just capturing joy. And I felt like I needed to capture some heavier subjects. So I went on a mission to travel around and do more documentary work with people I knew that were working in more challenging fields. So I go to Kenya and I'm planning on doing a big project on mental health. I have a friend that's living there and I'm going to document some work there. While there for a month, I went to this little island called Lamu, and I have never been so captivated by a place in my entire life. Most people have never heard of Lamu Island, and it's off the coast of Kenya, and it's incredibly small. It's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and there's no cars. It's really hard to get to. It takes a few planes and a little boat from one island to the other. And I fell in love with it. And as soon as I left, I knew I had to get back. So being a photographer, I had a bit of a flexible schedule. And the first year I lived in Lamu, I commuted back for like 15 weddings. So I actually came across the globe multiple times. And then when I settled there, it was just the sense of this is where I belong. I was able to photograph women and artists and education and just have a great time. It's an island that attracts really interesting people and a lot of artists. And so my plan was just to live there forever. I became a Kenyan resident and I figured this was my spot. And then this was about 2011 and the area became very dangerous. Somali pirates were traveling down the coast. Somalia is a close neighbor to these islands, and the whole dynamic changed. And there was no longer weddings coming in for me to photograph, and the tourism industry died down. And so I left, and I was pretty brokenhearted. I actually think that was one of the great heartbreaks of my life was leaving that island, and came back to the States and wound up in St. Michael's because this felt like an easy reentry. If you've ever lived somewhere very, very different, like a tiny island in the middle of the Indian Ocean where you don't wear shoes for years, coming back to DC or New York or just any normal kind of American suburb is hard. So St. Michael's is this dynamic little town, 700 people.
Beautiful. I love St. Michael's.
And I was like, I have an idea. This seems like a good place. And I called a friend and I ran her bed and breakfast for almost a year. And that was my reentry. And it was during running the little B&B here in 2012 that the idea germinated. What does this town need? There's a small winery. There's a small brewery. No one's distilling. Wait, why isn't anyone distilling? Is anyone distilling in Maryland? No one has distilled rum in Maryland in almost 50 years. Okay, let's figure this out. And so it was way less of a great business idea or plan as a kind of a project. It felt not unlike other small undertakings. And so started really, really small, like one of the tiniest distilleries that ever started. In fact, my distillery is on the cover of an industry book called Nano Distillery, like how to do it really, really, really tiny. So that's the long answer. It's a little convoluted.
Yeah. Well, and then are you teaching yourself how to do this? When you say starting small, are you in a basement somewhere? Like, I don't even know what's involved in that.
So starting a distillery is not so easy because it is federally regulated, and then it's regulated by the state, and then it's often even regulated by your county. So you have to apply for your license through the federal government. And you can't do it at home. So you have to have a building. But a lot of small distilleries, when you go into their garage space, it kind of looks like something that could be, a home operation. It's a small scale. Many start large, but 12 years ago, the distilling industry in this country was just reviving. And I say just reviving from like post-prohibition, right? Prohibition decimated the distilling industry in this country. And then it kind of had a little bit of a resurgence, but after prohibition, there were so many laws in place, so many taxes in place, things changed a lot. And so in probably maybe the 80s, you started to see a few distilleries pop up out west. But it trickled. So in the last couple of years, we've gone from when we opened in 2013, there were about 100 or so distilleries in the country. And I'm just talking small guys, not our big Jack Daniels, et cetera. Although you could include those. It's about 100 craft. Now there's 4,000. So it has wildly exploded, but it was right on the cusp of that. So when you have a small community, you have a lot of people that are willing to share, a lot of people that are doing it really small. And obviously YouTube and all of these, different channels, like we bought our stills, little tiny stills. So like you could hold them, 26-gallon pot stills that are made of aluminum and copper. And that still maker had a YouTube channel where they would teach you how to do things. And so it was a real small trial and error, and it was awesome because the community was small. So in the industry, there were all these forums and you could say, hey, this isn't working. What are you using? Hey, how'd you try this? And it was really great. So there was a lot of trial and error, in the beginning, but being so focused on knowing what we wanted to make and also having this wild expanse of knowing what I did and didn't like and being tuned into the industry, it wasn't making it was a leap, but the idea of making it and knowing what you wanted to put out, that was easy. I already knew what was out there. I knew what was missing, and what we could do differently. So yeah, it was, I just didn't know how people would respond. And so I famously didn't want to sign more than a year lease on the building. And now fast forward 12 years and I'm trying to sign a 10-year lease, as we increase because now it's a real business. But in the beginning, it definitely felt like an experiment and let's see if people like it, we'll make more, is that classic startup of make a batch. If they like it, buy more ingredients, make another batch. And so there wasn't this all in moment like many of my friends and peers have had where they risked it all or they got a large bank loan or they had investors. This was incredibly the most, I think $15,000 was the savings that we started with. You can't even buy a car for $15,000, but managed to start a distillery with one and with that much. And that's crazy. And it's harder to do now. Just because equipment, everything's gotten more expensive. But it was the right time. There's always these moments where everything's just about to happen. And if you're part of it, it's really hard and crazy, but it's also, you don't know what you don't know. So you just leap in and you're like, see if this works. And if it doesn't, okay. This wasn't my dream. So it wasn't like I had a lot riding on it. It's become my life and what I love the most. But yeah, it didn't start that way.
I'm going to circle back to a theme that you just said there in a minute. But before that, I want to talk a little bit about 12 years in business. Obviously, starting a business has its own set of challenges, right? But I think what people may not necessarily realize is that sustaining a business also comes with its unique set of challenges and wonderful things. But what would you attribute your and I'll say success, you can define that however you want, which we'll get to later. But what would you contribute your, 12 years in business to? What traits of your people, what makes, your business special that you guys are still doing great and growing 12 years in?
It's such a great question because I think that's all anybody wants to know, right? How do you make something that lasts? And I think there's a lot of luck involved. And we could talk for hours about all the times that I feel like I've been very lucky with an opportunity or something that happened or timing. I attribute a lot of our success to being in St. Michael's. St. Michael's is a beautiful town where right now it's very quiet. I can see the distillery across the street, and there's hardly any guests. But in the summer, we get hundreds of people dumped on our doorstep, every day, every week. And so you have a wonderful audience. So that's been a gift. Starting anywhere else might have been more challenging. So marketing was never something I had to worry about. Started really, really small and only made things that we're proud of. Never released anything that I don't think is exceptional and that I wouldn't want to drink, to the point where sometimes we release stuff and we don't even sell all the bottles because I want them. We're saving them. So commitment to quality. So those things are kind of like luck and guarantees, like or a baseline. You have to have an excellent product. I'm sure a lot of people make a business making something that's not excellent. But for me, it's always been about, it's really easy in this day and age. It's going to be a little harder, but to have a great story, something beautiful to offer, something that tastes nice. And it's easy to sell that first item. We say this a lot in this industry. It's very easy to sell the first bottle. It's captivating, it's enticing. But now there's so many others out there that, then you go to the store and you see something else. And so if you're a spirits aficionado, 10 years ago, there was like no American rum. So there wasn't a lot of competition or even just like community industry. Now there's a lot more. So now my job is to make sure I sell somebody their new favorite bottle of rum. But I think I always knew that intrinsically. I knew that I didn't want to just make a sale and be done. I wanted them to be as excited when they got home or when they shared that with somebody else. And so like keeping this like enthusiasm going. So I think what our success is probably due to is my relentless and insane enthusiasm, which I deliver every day to my staff and to our customers. And I think that's what sets us apart. Like if anybody knows Lion, they'll always say, "Oh, I know Lion. Yeah, it's great rum." They're so nice. They're so fun. Like we love having them at events. We bring a lot to the table. And so everyone that works at the distillery now embodies that same kind of enthusiasm. And so that's the thing I'm most proud of. Like at this point, I know if you try the rum, you're going to love it. Not worried about that at all. But I'm really proud that when you come, you're going to have a great time. Wherever you meet us at a farmer's market or at the distillery, our kind of infectious energy, I think that might be the number one thing we sell. It just comes in the form of rum in a bottle, but it's really that.
I love that. And what a thing to be associated with, right? I mean, from a brand perspective. You touched on, you said you made a comment a couple times about kind of opportunity and you can call it luck or whatever the word is, but we'll say preparation meeting opportunity, right?
I love
whatever,
that. Yes, yeah.
Whatever that intersection word is. But talk a little bit about that. When I say that, or when I ask that question, not in the sense of like a situation that happened to you, but just how important is that, being prepared for opportunities and taking advantage of the moment?
Well, that's everything, isn't it? But it's also knowing what not to take advantage of. I am an accidental business owner. I love working, but I never had a desire to run a business. And I don't have strategy. And I don't have a list of all these things that we should do or we shouldn't do. I got a lot of people telling me what I should do and shouldn't do. And they're often very successful people. And I'm not very rebellious. And I always listened to my teachers and adults when I was younger. But there is nothing that'll shut me down faster than someone telling me what I'm supposed to do with my business. Even if it looks like a surefire way to become a millionaire, which I am not. I run what I think is a very successful company. I know it's successful because we have awesome products that are still on the shelves, because I'm constantly hiring people, because I'm constantly increasing their compensation. But we're not a successful company in that we have all this extra revenue. We still operate pretty thin. We reinvest into the company. And so my strategy is just to do what feels right. And so when it comes to success or listening to other people about business things, I think I've been, in retrospect, I'm so glad I never did the things people told me I had to do in order to be successful. So that's a thing too. So like you have to be open to opportunities that come along, but there's been so many opportunities that everyone's like, you got to do this. You got to do that. You got to. And I'm like, no, I just don't want to. A good example is canned cocktails. Canned cocktails are all the rage. I think everyone would agree. Mm-hmm. I do not like them. I do not make them. I will never make them. Mm-hmm. Full stop. And I think that was actually a really good decision, because early on, I wasn't interested, didn't have the capacity. Then as I saw that it was becoming a fad, I was like, well, why would I want to compete with everybody else that's doing it? Like, I'm just going to stay true to what we do. And now I see the challenges in the industry of how saturated that market is, how hard it is to make a profit on it, et cetera, et cetera. So it still looks like a cool thing. I mean, once a week, someone tells me I should make a canned cocktail. Someone called me 2 hours ago asking me to make a canned cocktail. I keep saying no. And And that's just one example of like the industry trying to dictate what's hip or hot or cool, and me saying, nope, that's not for us. And you never know if, we could have been $1 million company for making canned cocktails 7 years ago. I don't know. I just didn't want to do it. So I think aware of opportunities that come along, but also like, even if you don't have a good reason, if something doesn't feel right for your company, it's okay. Just don't do it. It's not, you don't have to do everything. You can't do everything. In fact, I think companies that try to do too much and be too much, they lose sight of who they are. And then suddenly they're not known for anything. And that was when we first started, we made rum. That was our first spirit. But then we very quickly dabbled in rye whiskey and corn whiskey and malt whiskey because it's fun to make things. And because Maryland has a heritage of distilling whiskey, this is a little nod of the hat to this history. And then after a few years, I decided to stop making whiskey altogether. And I got so much backlash. It was out of control. Neighbors, magazine writers, we had gotten a lot of accolades for being the first Maryland rye in the state in like 42 years. And people couldn't understand why I would let that go. And I was like, well, it's not our favorite thing to make. We need to make rum. And we only ever made this tiny 1% of what we made was rye whiskey. Someone else is going to do that. And now there's dozens of distilleries whose mission is to make Maryland rye. And it's wonderful. But everyone told me it was the worst decision that I've ever made. And that was 7 or 8 years ago now. And I think it was the best decision because we very quickly became known for what we love, which is rum. Small subset of this industry, not as widely popular or respected, but a hell of a lot of fun to break into and to talk about and to say, yeah, we only make rum. And they go, do you think you'll ever try to make a whiskey? I'm like, oh, did that in the beginning. Not for me. And they're like, oh, and that just really challenges what people think is a smart move. And I love doing that. I don't do it on purpose, but I love when it works out the way that I felt it would.
Well, and I think that's such a, for you as a leader, right? I mean, that's such an impressive thing. And I'm not saying that you do or don't. I don't know you well enough to do this, but to give your, I guess I'm giving you credit or roses, right? For staying true and authentic to what that brand is or what your vision is. And I think that really matters. And you're seeing that, right? In the marketplace to your employees. And that's not always easy to do when you have that kind of outside pressure, people in your ear, right? Confidence, start to second guess yourself. And then you have to stay committed to it.
And you want to be smart, right? I think we are better by listening and learning from others, but you can't learn from everybody because everyone has a different mode to success. And it's like, if there was some magic formula, you could just do it. When I was a photographer, I had a wonderful colleague and boss at times. She ran a photography company, and we would teach these workshops, and it was about working with nonprofits, but it was also about getting paid for the work you love. And we used to always say to people, if money's all you want to make, that's easy. But if you want to make something you're proud of and get paid for it, that's the tricky part. And it's so relevant. And I think that's kind of an artist's dilemma, right? Is am I proud of this and can I sell it? Not just can I sell it?
Right.
Yeah.
What, for you in your industry, and you can answer this, one of two ways, as a owner of a business or as a owner of a distilling business, talk about some of the best sides of being a female in business and running business as a woman. Sometimes you hear the challenges that come with that, but there's a lot of upside and a lot of good things too. So let's focus on that. What are some things being a female business owner or a business owner in general that that you love?
Yeah, I think the number one thing would be the ability to surprise people. It's really hard when people don't take you seriously or when they think that you're less than because you're not who they expected. My name is Jamie, and that's a very unisex name. And a lot of people associate Jamies with men. So I can't tell you how many times people call looking for Mr. Jaime Windon, and they are surprised, disappointed, confused, or embarrassed when they find out that I'm Jamie, and that's not my father, and that's not my husband, and that I'm the person to talk to. I've never had it be a disadvantage. I think that there's been challenges, but every time I somehow feel less than because I'm not a man in this industry, and I could say that in the past. I don't feel that anymore. I haven't felt that in many years. It just made me work harder. It made me become smarter so that when I had something to say, I knew that I was going to be the smartest person in the room, even if it didn't look like I was going to be to somebody for whatever reason. So I think there's this cool opportunity that when people, how do I want to say this?
Prejudge.
Yeah, when they prejudge you or when they have low expectations. I love low expectations. Under promise and over deliver. Under expect and then you can over deliver. When people walk into my distillery now and they've heard, about how great we are, that we were the best rum distillery in the country 4 years in a row, or they heard this glorious podcast with you and they just think I'm brilliant. It's hard to match that expectation. They're coming in and they expect high things. But when someone comes in and they're like, wait, who's this chick in a hooded sweatshirt telling me she makes rum in the back? I doubt it's any good. And then they try it and then they listen and then I explain it. You've just exceeded all their expectations. So for anybody that is ever being misjudged or somebody is thinking you're less than, don't worry about what they think. Just know how good it feels when you can prove them wrong. And you have to do it graciously, because if you're like, haha, I tricked you, look how smart I am, that's not fun for anyone. It's more this genuine ability to open people's mind and then maybe change it gently. So I think there's that. I also think that whenever you are in a subsect of any industry where you are the outlier and it feels negative, there is always an advantage, right? There's always room for opportunity to be recognized or to find, actually, forget being recognized. Who cares about being recognized? All I've ever cared about is finding my community. And so as soon as I was like, yes, I am a woman in this industry. I own a distillery. I run a distillery. I do business in a distillery. My best friends in this industry are women who do the same thing. It's easier to find the people that are your people and like you when there's less of you. If I was a man in this industry, I'd have 4,000 peers just like me. As a woman, I maybe have a few hundred at best, and probably 5 I can count on my hand that are really the people who have been through it and know. And we've all ended up being leaders in the industry. I sit on a number of boards for the American Craft Spirits Association, for the Maryland Distillers Guild, and more often than not, it's always women that are seated there. And so if you look at our industry right now, we actually appear to be overrepresented for how many of us there are, because we're just the ones raising our hands and saying yes, and having a hell of a good time working together. So it's been fun. And I learned from them. So you said also another advantage is I think women lead differently and women do business differently. Not all women, and I hate blanket statements. I cannot speak for all women, but I can speak for myself. And if me knowing that, I hate the phrase, it's not personal, it's just business. My business is incredibly personal. And every way I treat everybody, from the freight driver who is late to my staff who's struggling, kindness, compassion, generosity, it goes a long way in leadership. And I think that those are naturally feminine traits. And while men can embody them, women often lead in that way a little bit differently, or at least I do. So I think that's an advantage as well for longevity and staying power.
What does what's the I won't necessarily call it I'm not even going to call it the underbelly, but what's the hardest part about your job? And again, you can answer that as just running a business or running a distilling business.
Because this is the only business I've ever run, being a photographer, being self-employed and kind of hustling in art is a very different type of business. This is a serious business. The worst part of my job is that it is a federally regulated substance. I have so much paperwork and so many sometimes conflicting regulators, from the federal government to the state to the local. But I think the worst thing about this business in particular is just how it's regulated. I have a product, and if you loved it right now, I can't put it in the mail and send it to you.
Yeah.
That's really frustrating. So we operate in almost a mafia-esque environment for distribution and sales. And so small craft distilleries have a really cool advantage. And your small breweries, your small wineries, all small alcohol makers are attractive and interesting and have really good products, often made in amazingly superior ways. But the barrier to entry in the market, because of the way that big alcohol controls distribution and shelf space, we never have a fighting chance. So we're starting to see a lot of breweries close or fold into others. It's just starting in the distilling industry where we're seeing distilleries close. And it's it's not for nothing. It's because the industry is pegged against us. So the underbelly of it is, unless you're a huge brand with a celebrity endorsement and millions of dollars to blow on campaigns, you're never going to really make it, or you're going to sell. So being just a lifestyle, sustainable, independent spirit maker might be one of the hardest businesses I could imagine ever running.
Yeah. Where do you guys do most of your distribution? I mean, obviously people can come into your, I don't know if they come into the distillery itself or if you have a tasting area, but how do you guys distribute? Or if people want to buy your product or try it, how do they best get it?
Yeah, so we have a lot of options now. We sell a lot at the distillery. And the first couple of years, we sold everything to people that visited us. And then we also run our own distribution throughout Maryland and DC, which is an odd option, but it works for us and we've grown it. So now it's a whole division of our company that my sister runs. So that's been great because we have direct access to our liquor stores. We're not relying on a middleman to place us, et cetera. So we're available all throughout Maryland, but not everywhere and not every rum everywhere. And then we have a network of out-of-state distributors in certain areas that sell us as well. So it's tricky, but I mean, most of the ways we sell our bottles are the same way that other craft distillers do, at farmers markets, at festivals, anywhere that will have us. And that required a lot of legislative changes because when we opened, we were only permitted to sell 3 bottles per person to a guest that came to the distillery, not go anywhere else, not sample. Now we've passed a ton of laws in Maryland to allow farmers markets and festivals. So every time you're out and you see a distiller offering their rum, vodka, gin, whiskey, et cetera, to you at a festival, know that that wasn't possible a decade ago. We've really made some changes because the industry's changed. So when you have a distribution network that is not set up to serve you, you really need to hustle. And so that's where the hard work comes in. So you'll pay attention more and be like, wait, there's a lot of distilleries, breweries, and wineries in pop-up tents all over the place. And that's a great way to get our products to the people that care about them.
That is fascinating. I knew that there were restrictions, but I didn't realize even as soon as a decade ago that it was that tight. I mean, in terms of what you're able to do. I mean, that's even more impressive, quite honestly, to be able to grow the business, to even get to the point where you are, given those restrictions that you guys had early on.
Oh yeah, it's and we talk about this all the time. Like as the industry has grown, and if you open a distillery today, it's a very different prospect. I mean, it's harder because there's so many more. But it's also so easy. It's like the old adage of, your grandparent telling you, oh, in my day, we had to. Yeah, when I opened, you literally couldn't do anything other than take someone on a tour of your distillery and then offer them 3 samples max. And, and now you can do so much more. And it's interesting to see how that changes people's business plans. People are writing business plans based on abilities we didn't even have 10 years ago. It's wild.
Yeah, that is wild. Speaking of 10 years ago, or we'll go any point in your career, but what advice would you give your younger self?
Gosh, there's so much, but I think the biggest thing is to enjoy the roller coaster. I get so frustrated when there's these days where it's never ending. The chaos, the supply chain problems, a burst pipe. I mean, you name it. Like we're also a manufacturing facility. So like anything that can go wrong will go wrong constantly. And it was many years ago that I read this book, but it's only recently that I started revisiting the idea of the infinite game mindset, like an infinite.
That's Simon Sinek?
Yes. And I realized
I love this concept.
I love this concept. And no one talks about it enough because we're all focused on the finite. We're like, how do we get there? What's your goal? What's your vision? What's your revenue projection? How many cases do you want to sell? And I've never given a hoot about those things. So when I'm the most miserable and when I look back and when I was the scaredest, the saddest, the most stressed out, it's because I was stuck in a finite loop. And it had to happen. It had to happen now. And if it didn't happen, what was it going to mean? But every time I step back and tell myself, it's an infinite game. I just want to keep playing. Everything's fine. And I love that concept. And I don't think it's embraced widely enough in business. I don't think it's taught to entrepreneurs and young people that if you just want to keep playing, it's a very different game than if you have to win or lose. And I think that has guided me before I understood it. And then I read it years ago and then forgot about it. And I've just come back to it. I need to keep reading this. I need like one of those, tattooed on the inside of my arm, like that this is an infinite game, because I love that. I don't think that you have to lose in order for me to win. I've never believed that. And I think I've proven that by being part of my community and helping other distillers. I just want a good environment and I want everyone to do better. And I think that that's part of an infinite mindset. But it's also knowing that like there's going to be ups and downs. And if you want something boring, well then, safe is boring, right? Like risky and wild, like this is what it is. But there's many years I've lost sleep over things that felt like the end of the world. Surprisingly, things that actually were the end of the world, like COVID and others, I jumped into gear and I was fine. We never stopped working. But if I could tell myself from a very young age, just keep playing the infinite game, have that mindset, I think I would have saved myself a lot of stress over the last decade. But it's hard. It's a lot easier to have that mindset when it's just about you. And I think I lived that first decade of being free and only responsible for myself and living across the world. Now I've got about a dozen people that rely on me for their living. And it's very different. So I have to think about things a little differently than I used to.
How do you think about or guidance or advice that you would have? I mean, there's obviously multiple parts to running and owning a business. And whether you're talking about cash flow or contract negotiations, what advice do you have for people who, partnership agreements, just in general? Like, what advice do you have for people when they're starting a business and it comes to, or they're negotiating with a new customer, and it comes to, terms of agreements versus an old school handshake type deal? What guidance or advice
I'm the queen of handshakes. My lawyer, I drive my lawyer crazy with the number of, and I have a number right now of existing handshake partnerships. I've actually never signed a contract with any of my distributors. I have no contracts in place at all, which is crazy.
Your lawyer is pulling their hair out right now.
He goes nuts. He's like, Jamie, why didn't you send it to me? I'm like, well, you're just going to charge me to look at it. You're not going to like it. I'm still going to do it. So what's the point? I guess the advice would be, you can't really change who you are, right? And I could go back and I could see some things where I should have done it differently, but I still wouldn't have. And, I learned so many lessons, and even the ones that are like the worst, you're like, if I just would have done that, it would have been easier. I guess the advice would be not to change who you are and to keep doing it the way that you feel good about it. Because it just doesn't feel good for me to enter into any agreement where, so you're going to sign here and that tells me you're going to mean it. Bullshit, right? Like we all know we're in a litigious society. Even a contract can be contested. But maybe the thing to do is to take 1 minute when you're really excited about this next thing you're jumping into, with whether it's business, whether it's love, whatever you're doing. And just at the risk of being a negative Nancy, just say, what is the worst case scenario? What if things went wrong? How wrong could they go? And how could I protect myself in the future from this being the worst case scenario? And I think about that all the time with certain aspects of our business. I mean, we make a consumable good. So we have to be ready for any kind of recall. I mean, knock on wood, we've never had anything. We're incredibly focused on our product quality, but you save little bottles from every batch. We've now made like 2,000 batches. I have 2,000 little bottles just in case something ever goes wrong with one. So you think about what you wish you would have known in the future. So maybe that's it, but it's still, you can't tell people to do what doesn't feel right, And for me, the problem with me and business is if I don't feel it in my heart, I'm not interested in doing it at all. So if we need a contract, we need a paper, we need all this formality, it starts to lose the appeal. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of a romantic in a lot of ways, I realized, and it's bitten me a couple times, but it's nothing I haven't recovered from.
There you go. I have one more question before I get to rapid fire. But before I do that, is there anything that you want to cover or talk about that we haven't yet talked about?
No. There's so much I could talk to you forever. This is great. I think that there's so much confusion, stereotypes, mysticism, whatever you want to call it, around owning your own business and about what that means and about how you do it. There's this elusive idea of what an entrepreneur is and isn't. I got in a fight with a radio host the other week because I don't consider myself an entrepreneur at all. I'm just someone who says yes and gets excited if there's an idea and I want to do it. I like doing stuff, but I'm not like this brilliant creator. I'm just a hard hustler and I get excited. And when people want something, I want to do that. So I think, when it comes to starting a business or especially, I'm in the product space. So if there's a product that you believe in, there's a million ways to have a business. And so if anyone would have told me all the things I needed to know and do to have a distillery, I never would have even thought about it for more than a minute. But the way I did it, incredibly accessible, incredibly attainable, incredibly scalable. That's the way to do things. Like do things genuinely more than what you're told you should do. In our industry, there's a saying that you can't start a distillery for under $1 million. And I'm always like, had no dollars. And so there, you can start it. Is it going to be harder? Is it going to be trickier? Are you going to have weeks where you're out of product? Yeah. But would you rather have that be your origin story, or you've invested millions of dollars into something you're not even sure people want, and then you're having to sell it? So there's always a push and a pull. But business is different. But it's also not this like ticket to freedom that people think it is. There's that too. There's a lot of freedom. I couldn't imagine ever working for somebody. I've always just worked for myself. But there's also a lot to be said about working for a company that you care about, as opposed to having to have your own company. If you are passionate about something, being part of a team is right for someone. So just because you have a great idea doesn't mean you have to throw everything away and go start a company. It's really not for the faint of heart. I encourage business owners every day, but I'm also like, hey, if that's not for you, there's a million ways to do it. If you just want to have, a product, you can find someone to make that for you. You don't necessarily need the whole shebang. And so I think our industry is full of people going different ways to produce something. And we have that at the distillery. We have another distillery that operates under our wide umbrella that makes all of their own products from scratch in the shared space. And then we have another woman who has a product and we make it for her with all of her recipes and input, but it just is sold out of a different channel. So owning a distillery, for example, there's a million ways to have a spirits brand. So I would just say that there's no one way.
I love that. I love everything that you just said there when it comes to, everything you said, but particularly the part of being an employee is also a really great thing. And business ownership is not always there's amazing things to it, but there's also the thing of like, you're your own boss. Like, okay, kind of, but like, so are my clients and my employees. So it's not exactly, yeah.
When I'm overwhelmed, I ask my staff to tell me what to do. I'm like, can someone just be my boss? Like, can you just tell me what you need from me? Because it's so hard to constantly be the one with the vision and the answers and the solutions and making payroll. Come on. You lose yourself. So
yeah. That led me to one more question before I get to my last one. Talk a little bit about your experience with just, call it, I don't know how else to say it, work-life integration, right? But to your point, the vision, that takes a lot of mental energy for people. You're obviously a very high energy person, but it does take energy to do all those things and be thinking all the time. How do you integrate like work and life and prioritizing things? Because, outside of being a business owner, you're a daughter or a sister or, whatever other relationships.
No, I'm glad you brought this up, because honestly, if I'm being really honest, and like there's a million factors to why we're successful, but if there's a reason we're in business 12 years later, it's because this is my life. 100%. Full stop. Like 100 hours a week if it needs to be still. I don't have a work-life separation. It very much is who I am. I'm lucky that my family and my favorite people work with me. My social life is doing rum events and hosting people. And often people, when they compliment me and they say, wow, you do so much. You're on this board, you're here, you're there, how do you do it all? I have recently had to make it very clear. I do it all because I am not a mother and I am not a partner. So I do not have other things that need my full attention or pull me away. And you can absolutely have all the things you want, but I made a very conscious decision that work is the beginning and the end of everything I do. And I work my family and my friends and my travel and my new dabbling in community theater. I work those things in, but work is number one. Just like for many people, your relationship is number one, or your children are number one, and other things get worked in. I don't have that. So I am really in awe of anyone who is doing what I'm doing and also has children or a partner that they're supporting. So that's my secret weapon, is that it's just me at the end of the day, and a cat that doesn't need a lot. So I can give all of it to my company and all of it to my team. And so I've never found that work-life balance because I love it so much. But at the risk of another story, last year I broke my foot in October, and then I fell down the stairs and fractured my spine in November.
Oh my gosh.
And I was incapacitated. When I broke my foot in October, it did not slow me down. 2 days later, I was at the Distillery running around like a fool. I was in a play. It was whatever. I'd also... Yeah, it's just no big deal.
The spine, though. The spine that will slow you down.
I literally fell down the stairs, landed right there.
Gosh.
And so this was the first time in my entire life that I remember being physically incapacitated, and everything had to stop. And this is the end of the year, and we are so busy, and we were finishing a renovation, and there was so much going on, and I was looking forward to so much, and I was devastated. And I went through a pretty significantly dark and stressful time because I was home for 8 weeks. And during that 8 weeks, I didn't work. For the first couple of weeks, I didn't do anything. I didn't even talk to anybody really, except for my family. And I had to reconcile with, who am I if I can't move, if I can't do not only the work I love, but the work that I'm used to doing, hauling cases of rum. Because even when I got better, I wasn't allowed to lift anything over 15 pounds. And that's every day of my life. And I had this massive separation. So it was almost like, 8 weeks is like a sabbatical.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had to kind of re-examine not what makes me happy, but where I get my worth. And I realized that I've always gotten my worth from a young age at being the one who is doing more than everybody else, who is there to help you, who's got your back. And I've done that for my company. But what was great was, one, I don't want to stop doing that. I talk to business friends like, what's your exit strategy? I'm like, I'm going to be behind that tasting bar for the next who knows how long. But seeing that when I literally couldn't do anything, my team was fine. Everything was great. They didn't need me. They like having me there. They like my help. They love if I'm going to load the rum van for them in the morning. But if I'm not there, I've built something that's pretty sustainable. And I think that, I've taught them a lot, but I also recognized what they had in them that they brought to our company. And so the whole thing works. And so, that was my first taste of what it was like not to be working probably for the first time in my entire life. No, I'm still figuring it out.
Well, and what a compliment to you and to your team that, there is something to be said that's pretty special and amazing, I think, about having known nothing about your staff that works there. But other than that, a couple stories that you've just shared, but like that they had your back, that like when you needed it, like they were there for you, and to keep the business going and running. And I think that's really special too. And something that I think in small businesses, I think often gets overlooked also is you do have that real sense of community and support amongst people that work there. So
absolutely. And I think many small business owners might not even know how cohesive their team is because they're used to inserting themselves in all the time. So for those people out there who are working business owners and who are a big part of their own team, it's good to test that before it's because I think a lot of us, you could query a ton of business owners like myself that are like, oh, if I was gone for a week, everything would fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be true, it might not. And if it is true, you need to get some systems in place so it doesn't. But also knowing like, this is okay. Like,
mm-hmm.
I like being here and I'm an asset to my company, but my company's also doing great.
Mm-hmm. Well, the wonderful thing also, it seems about you and the work that you do is that, and I can tell by the energy and the way you talk about it, is that it's not just work, right? It's like, we define it as work, but you enjoy what you're doing, right? You enjoy going to those tastings and being out there and talking to people and telling and selling your amazing product.
It's a mission. It's that connection, right? So I live for connections.
Right.
And there's been times in the past where I was like, rum distillery owner? No, I'm supposed to be photographer off the coast of insert exotic country here. Like, this is what I do. Because that was my identity. And then I realized, no, all I want to do is connect with people. So whether it's with a pen, whether it's with a camera, whether it's with a bottle of rum, like if I can connect, then I am fulfilled.
What a wonderful way to frame it. My last question before I get to rapid fire, how do you define success?
This is a constant struggle. And I recently gave kind of a talk on metrics of success. Because if you Google metrics of success, you come up with all sorts of acronyms that mean nothing to me, even after I Google their definitions. To me, success is satisfaction. Because it's not necessarily happiness. It's not necessarily wealth. It's not necessarily any visual indicator, but it's feeling satisfied with the work that you're doing. It's at the end of the day being proud of what you're doing. Because I know so many people that are wildly successful in one area, but really lacking in their own satisfaction or their own self-worth. And so I've never judged the success of our company by our bank account or by our footprint, which is how everybody else judges it. But by how meaningful what we're doing is. Are we impacting people's life for the better? Is that the people that come into those doors to work every day, people that visit us, the people that interact? And it's a tough question, right? I mean, I think we all want to give value to other people with the products and the things that we make. And I get to see it. And so I feel really successful after I've changed someone's mind, or I've taught them something, or I've introduced them to a flavor that they've never encountered, or I've given them the gift of taking that and sharing it with someone else. To me, that's success. So I definitely do get in the weeds, and I judge like every day as a success sometimes, which I know it needs to be this overarching. But yeah, I think success is tied somehow with satisfaction and reward. That you feel it. I'm still working on it, but I think that's what it is for me. I think it's pride and satisfaction are good definitions of success.
Very well articulated. Very well. I'm going to jump to rapid fire. This is unrelated to everything that we've talked about so far. I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 questions, just whatever comes to mind. Whatever comes to mind. Grass or sky?
Sky.
Pen or pencil?
Pencil.
Beach or mountain?
Beach.
Brick or stone?
Brick.
Go to a movie, watch at home?
Probably go to a movie.
East Coast, Theater. East Coast, West Coast?
East Coast.
Astronaut or deep sea diver?
Astronaut.
And the last one, sun or moon?
Ooh. Sun, because the moon is impossible to photograph. If I can't photograph it, I'm not interested.
Oh, it's funny. Well, Jaime, thank you so much for being a guest. This was wonderful. I love learning about your story, your background, and your business. It's really been great talking with you. I feel like I could just talk to you for hours. But
you're wonderful at this. This has been very insightful to me. I feel like I'm constantly still learning about what I value and what is important to me. And it's always interesting to re-examine your own story through someone else's eyes, and especially the connections that you draw. So no, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And to our audience, until next time, this is the Lauren Asghari podcast, How Did Her Career Get There? And we will see you at the next episode.
Let's talk a bunch of different topics.
How her career get there.
This is a podcast with Lauren Asghari.